My name is Michael Grayson. I'm 40 years old, and until a few days ago, I was the Director of Operations and Strategy at BluePeak Technologies, a mid-sized software company in Boston, Massachusetts. For 14 years, I dedicated my entire life to this company. I arrived early, left late, and helped build every process, every system, every relationship that made BluePeak grow from a 10-employee startup to an operation with over 200 people. What nobody at the company knew is that I could have had any job I wanted. In fact, I never would have needed to work a single day in my life. I'm the son of billionaire Richard Grayson, owner of a financial empire that controls investments in dozens of countries. But when I graduated with an MBA from Harvard, I made a decision that would change my life forever. I refused the offer to work at my father's company, cut all financial ties with the family, and decided to build my career on my own merit. If you enjoy stories of cold-blooded revenge and gripping plot twists like this video, and subscribe to the channel now. There are brand new, unreleased stories here every day, each one more intense than the last. I wanted to prove to myself that I was capable of succeeding without using the Grayson name as a golden ticket. At BluePeak, I was simply Michael, the operations guy. I optimized processes, solved problems, built bridges between departments. I wasn't the type of executive who appeared in magazines or gave talks at conferences. I was the man behind the scenes, the one who made things actually work. My personality was always more reserved. I focused on efficiency and, most importantly, on the dignity of the employees who truly built the company day after day. The programmers, the analysts, the tech support folks, the field salespeople. These people were the heart of BluePeak, and I always advocated that they be treated with respect and recognition. This discretion, however, ended up making me a target. In many people's eyes, I was just a competent employee, but without the shine of great executives. My real value was completely unknown, and that's exactly what almost cost me everything. 6 months ago, BluePeak hired a new CEO, Robert Sterling, 50 years old, a corporate predator known for his aggressive restructuring and obsessive focus on short-term profits. From day one, I knew we'd have problems. Sterling arrived with a mindset of radical cuts, mass layoffs, and questionable partnerships that prioritize numbers over people. In the first few months, I tried to work with him. I presented detailed reports showing how the company culture was our greatest asset, how employee loyalty translated into productivity and client retention. But Sterling looked at me like I was a dinosaur talking about outdated values. To him, I represented everything that needed to be eliminated from the company. The situation gradually worsened. Loyal employees, some with over 10 years at the company, started getting fired without warning. Long-term projects were canceled. The work environment, which had once been collaborative and respectful, became a battlefield where each department competed against the others for scarce resources. I documented everything, every questionable decision, every employee unfairly dismissed, every canceled project that could have generated future revenue. My intuition, forged through years of analysis and also from my privileged background that taught me to identify patterns of corporate behavior, told me that Sterling was driving BluePeak straight off a cliff. But in the end, none of that mattered. On the last Friday of June, just a few days before the July 4th holiday, Sterling called me into his office. He didn't even offer me a chair. He simply said, "Michael, as part of our restructuring, your position is being eliminated. We no longer need your type of old-school experience here." 14 years of dedication were discarded in 30 seconds. I was treated like dead weight, as if my contribution had never mattered. Sterling didn't even pretend it was difficult for him. There was cruel satisfaction in his eyes, as if he was finally getting rid of an annoying obstacle. At that moment, something very interesting happened to me. I didn't explode. I didn't yell. I didn't slam my fist on the desk. An ice-cold calm took over me, and a strategy began forming in my mind. Sterling had made the gravest mistake a predator can make. He had completely underestimated his prey. I took my box of personal belongings, said goodbye to colleagues for the last time, and left that building with my head held high. But Sterling had no idea what he had just unleashed. That same night, for the first time in 15 years, I called my father. Richard Grayson answered on the second ring, as he always did when he saw my name on caller ID. "Michael," he said, with that deep voice I'd known since childhood. "From the tone of your call, I imagine this isn't just to wish me a happy Independence Day." I explained the situation in detail. My father listened in silence, and when I finished, he asked just one question. "What do you need?" "Access to Grayson Holdings," I replied, "and total discretion." "You have it," he said without hesitation. "Your 15 years of independence proved everything you needed to prove, son. Now it's time to use the tools you've always had the right to." The following Monday, while Sterling probably thought I was at home lamenting my fate, I was at the Grayson Holdings office in Manhattan, meeting with the best corporate lawyers and financial analysts in the country. My plan was simple but devastating: buy a controlling stake in BluePeak Technologies through a network of anonymous holdings. During the following weeks, while Sterling implemented his reforms, my team began buying BluePeak stock on the market. The company was publicly traded, but with thinly traded shares, which made each purchase discreet but significant. We used different investment funds, various legal entities, always keeping each transaction below the threshold that would require public disclosure. The process was meticulous. Each purchase was calculated to avoid raising suspicions. In 3 weeks, we managed to accumulate 23% of the shares. In 2 more weeks, we reached 35%. And in the 6th week after my dismissal, we owned exactly 40% of BluePeak Technologies. Sterling had no idea that the company he thought he controlled was already, in practice, under my command. Meanwhile, I observed from afar the chaos Sterling was creating. Without my operations oversight, projects began falling behind. Important clients, who had personal relationships with me built over years, started questioning the company's direction. 3 vice presidents resigned in the same week. Morale plummeted so dramatically that even the company's Glassdoor page became a battleground of negative reviews. The most ironic part is that Sterling really believed he was doing an excellent job. In his weekly investor meetings, which I now received as an anonymous shareholder, he presented doctored numbers showing significant savings through personnel cuts. But anyone with real management experience could see he was destroying the company's fundamentals. During this period, I maintained discreet contact with some former colleagues. Sarah Chen, who had been my assistant for 8 years before being promoted to project manager, called me regularly to vent. "Michael, the company is falling apart," she said in one of those conversations. "Sterling fired the most experienced people, and now he's trying to make 3 people do the work of 10. The developers are working 70-hour weeks, and we still can't deliver on time." "Be patient, Sarah," I would respond. "Things will sort themselves out soon." Marcus Torres, who led the sales team, also reached out to me. "Clients are asking about you," he said. "TechFlow Industries canceled a $2 million contract because they don't trust our delivery capabilities anymore. MediaSync is considering switching vendors. Michael, what are you going to do?" "Keep doing your job the best way possible," I replied, "and document everything." What none of them knew was that I was documenting everything too. Every lost client, every delayed project, every talented employee who left the company. My legal team was building a detailed dossier of Sterling's mismanagement, including decisions that violated client agreements, questionable HR practices, and even some financial transactions that bordered on irregular. The turning point came when Sterling decided to call an extraordinary shareholders meeting for August 15th. His goal was to present the excellent results of the first half and get approval for a new round of layoffs and budget cuts. He wanted to consolidate his power and show shareholders that he was transforming BluePeak into a lean and efficient profit machine. The notice reached me through multiple channels, since technically I represented 40% of the shareholders, even though Sterling didn't know it. I read the document and smiled for the first time in months. Sterling had just handed me the perfect stage for my own resurrection. I spent the following 2 weeks preparing meticulously for that meeting. I reviewed every document, every number, every piece of evidence I had collected. I rehearsed my presentation until I knew it by heart. And for the first time since leaving BluePeak, I bought a new suit, a navy blue Armani that cost more than Sterling paid some employees in an entire month. The morning of August 15th dawned clear and hot in Boston. I arrived at the BluePeak building at 9:30 a.m., 30 minutes before the meeting. The auditorium was packed, not just with shareholders, but also with employees that Sterling had invited to witness his triumphant presentation. I recognized many familiar faces, people I had worked with for years who now looked at me with surprise and curiosity. Sarah Chen was in the third row, Marcus Torres at the back of the auditorium. Even Jennifer Walsh, the CFO who had survived the cuts by being one of the few people Sterling respected, was present. Everyone seemed tense, as if they sensed something important was about to happen. I positioned myself strategically in the fifth row, on the left side. Far enough to not draw immediate attention, but close enough so everyone could see me clearly when my time came. I brought with me a brown leather briefcase, the same one I'd used for 10 years, but now it contained something very different from the usual operational reports. Sterling entered the auditorium at exactly 10 a.m., wearing an expensive gray suit and displaying that predatory smile I knew so well. He greeted some important shareholders, waved condescendingly at employees, and took the stage with the confidence of someone who thought he completely controlled the situation. "Ladies and gentlemen, shareholders and employees of BluePeak Technologies," he began, his voice echoing through the auditorium. "Today is a historic day for our company. In just 6 months of new management, we've managed to transform a bloated and inefficient operation into a results machine." He clicked on the first slide of his presentation. The numbers looked impressive at first glance. 30% reduction in operational costs, 15% increase in gross margin, optimization of the workforce. To someone who didn't know the backstory, Sterling seemed like a management genius. "As you can see," he continued, "we eliminated redundancies, cut unnecessary expenses, and focused on what really matters: results for our shareholders. The old culture of corporate family gave way to a professional mindset oriented by metrics." I heard some uncomfortable murmurs among the employees present. Sterling was basically saying that treating people with dignity was unprofessional. I kept my expression neutral, but inside I felt a cold anger intensifying. "Naturally," Sterling continued, "this transformation required some difficult decisions. We had to part ways with some employees who represented the company's old mentality. People stuck in the past, resistant to change, who preferred to maintain the status quo rather than embrace innovation." He didn't mention me by name, but it was clear to everyone that he was talking about me and other veterans he had fired. Some employees looked directly at me, and I could see in their eyes a mixture of solidarity and indignation. Sterling continued for another 20 minutes, presenting optimistic projections and grandiose plans. He talked about international expansion, strategic acquisitions, and his vision of transforming BluePeak into a software unicorn valued at billions of dollars. It was an impressive performance, full of corporate jargon and empty promises. Finally, he reached the crucial point. "Therefore, I request shareholder approval for the second phase of our restructuring, which will include an additional 25% reduction in workforce and the redirection of resources to high-impact areas." In other words, Sterling wanted to fire another quarter of the remaining employees. I looked around and saw horror on people's faces. Sarah Chen was visibly pale. Marcus Torres clenched his fists. "Now," said Sterling with that satisfied smile, "I'd like to open the floor for questions from shareholders, remembering that only shareholders with participation greater than 5% have the right to speak at this meeting." That was my cue. I stood up slowly, adjusted my jacket, and walked to the microphone positioned in the center aisle. The auditorium fell into total silence. I could feel dozens of stares fixed on me, including Sterling's, who recognized me immediately and frowned with confusion and irritation. "Excuse me," I said, my voice coming out clear and firm through the sound system. "I have some questions for Mr. Sterling." "Michael Grayson," Sterling replied, trying to maintain composure but clearly uncomfortable. What a surprise to see you here. But I need to remind you that this meeting is restricted to qualified shareholders. If I'm not mistaken, you no longer work at BluePeak. You're correct, I replied calmly. I no longer work at BluePeak, but it turns out I am indeed a qualified shareholder. In fact, I represent exactly 40% of this company's shares. The silence that followed was deafening. Sterling blinked several times as if he hadn't understood correctly. Some shareholders looked at each other confused. The employees seemed to be holding their breath. "That's impossible," said Sterling, his voice losing some of its previous confidence. "I have records of all the company's major shareholders." I opened my briefcase and pulled out a set of documents. "Allow me to clarify the situation," I said, maintaining a respectful but firm tone. "Over the past 8 weeks through Grayson Holdings and its subsidiaries, I acquired a 40% stake in BluePeak Technologies. All documents were properly filed with the SEC and are here for verification by anyone interested." The auditorium exploded in murmurs. Sterling turned livid. He clearly didn't know who Grayson Holdings was, but the fact that I owned 40% of the company he thought he controlled left him completely disoriented. "Mr. Sterling," I continued, taking advantage of his confusion, "since you presented such impressive numbers, I'd like to confront them with some data I collected independently." I pulled out the second set of documents from my briefcase. "Over the past 2 months, I conducted an independent audit of BluePeak's operations. The results are quite different from the numbers Mr. Sterling presented today." Sterling tried to interrupt. "You don't have the authority to—" "Actually, as the majority shareholder, I have every authority," I cut in politely. "So, if you'll allow me to continue. In the past 6 months, BluePeak has lost 23% of its long-term clients. Projects worth $4.2 million were canceled due to delays and quality issues. Employee turnover increased by 340%, and recruitment and training costs consumed all the savings generated by the layoffs." The auditorium was in absolute silence. Sarah Chen had tears in her eyes. Marcus Torres was shaking his head, confirming everything I was saying. "More importantly," I continued, "we have documentation here of at least 12 contract violations with clients, 3 cases of questionable labor practices, and evidence that the numbers presented today were deliberately manipulated to hide the company's real financial situation." Sterling was red with anger. "These are unfounded accusations from a resentful employee." "Mr. Sterling," I interrupted again, my voice gaining strength, "I'm not a resentful employee. I'm Michael Grayson, son of Richard Grayson of Grayson Holdings. I spent 15 years building my career independently of my family's fortune to prove I could win on my own merit. And for 14 years, I dedicated my life to building this company based on values of respect, integrity, and operational excellence." The revelation about my true identity caused another uproar in the auditorium. Some smaller shareholders whispered among themselves. They knew Grayson Holdings' reputation. Sterling looked like he'd been struck by lightning. "You fired me thinking you were eliminating an obstacle," I continued. "But you were actually destroying the foundations that made this company something special. Every person you treated as disposable was a fundamental piece of a system that took years to build." Jennifer Walsh, the CFO, stood up. "Michael, all the numbers you presented are correct. I have the same data, but Sterling prohibited me from including them in the official presentation." That was the last straw. The auditorium exploded in heated discussions. Smaller shareholders demanded explanations. Employees began talking at the same time, sharing their own experiences under Sterling's management. Sterling tried to regain control. "Silence, this meeting is not a circus. Grayson, you may have bought shares, but that doesn't change the fact that I am the CEO of this company." "Not for much longer," I replied calmly. "As the majority shareholder, I request an immediate vote of no confidence in the current executive management." What happened next was one of the most satisfying revenges I've ever witnessed, precisely because it wasn't revenge. It was pure and simple justice. The vote was unanimous. Literally every other shareholder present voted for Sterling's immediate removal. Even the 2 board members who initially supported him switched sides when they saw the documentation I had prepared. Sterling was escorted out of the building that same afternoon. Before leaving, he faced me and said, "You're going to regret this, Grayson. I'm going to sue you and your family until—" "Mr. Sterling," I interrupted for the last time, "I suggest you consult your lawyers before making threats. We have enough evidence of mismanagement and possible fraud to keep your lawyers busy for the next few years." He left without saying another word. What came after surprised everyone, including myself. The shareholders unanimously offered me the CEO position. It was my chance to take complete control, to have complete revenge. But I realized that wasn't what I really wanted. "Thank you for the confidence," I told the group, "but I don't accept the position. Instead, I'd like to nominate Jennifer Walsh as interim CEO. She knows the company's real financial situation and has the necessary experience to guide us through this transition." Jennifer accepted, moved. In the following months, we worked together to rebuild BluePeak. We rehired some of the talented employees Sterling had fired. We recovered clients through an intensive relationship program. We implemented new processes that combined operational efficiency with genuine respect for people. As for Sterling, I learned from trade publications that he was sued by 3 former employers for mismanagement. His market reputation was completely destroyed. In the past 2 years, he tried to secure positions at various companies, but his name had become synonymous with toxic leadership and myopic vision. BluePeak, on the other hand, became a case study in business schools about how to recover a company through ethical leadership and focus on fundamentals. Our revenues grew 180% in 2 years. We were voted one of the best companies to work for by the Boston Business Journal 3 consecutive years. I kept my shareholding but refused any executive position. I preferred to act as an advisor, focusing on the issues that always motivated me: dignity at work, people development, and building something lasting instead of quick profits. I learned that true leadership isn't about the position you hold, but about the courage to defend what's right, even when that means stepping out of your comfort zone. Sterling did me a favor by firing me. He forced me to use resources I had avoided for 15 years. And in the process, I discovered that my greatest strength wasn't in the family money, but in the ability to build something meaningful with the right people. Today, 3 years later, BluePeak employs 340 people and is considered one of the most ethical and innovative software companies in Boston. Sarah Chen is our new VP of Operations. Marcus Torres leads the entire East Coast sales department. And me? I finally found peace knowing I built something lasting, not just profitable. Sterling never again secured a prominent executive position. The last time I heard about him, he was working as a freelance consultant struggling to rebuild a reputation he himself destroyed. I don't feel sorry for him, but I don't feel anger either. He was just a lesson in disguise, proof that arrogance and greed always find their own path to destruction. If you enjoyed this story, please give this video a like and leave a comment sharing your thoughts. And if you're not subscribed yet, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on the bell so you don't miss any of our future stories. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.